Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. I'm Beatriz, Mourad, and today I'm joined by Andy Potter.
Hey there.
Today we'll be discussing the latest 4 episodes of Star Wars Rebels, so that's Jedi Knight, Doom, Wolves in a Door, and A World Between Worlds. If you haven't kept up with Rebels, it's in its final season, and since last Monday, Disney has started to air its final 7 episodes. Jedi Knight and Doom aired last Monday, Wolves in a Door and A World Between Worlds aired yesterday, and next week will be the big finale of the series. We will be talking spoilers of everything that has aired so far, so if you haven't seen these episodes, go watch them and come back. If you haven't seen Rebels and you're a fan of Star Wars, what have you been doing? Go watch the show and then come back. And you can find out more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes, where we appreciate your star ratings, or search for Overly Animated on your favorite podcatcher. So, before we get started, very quickly, Andy, what were your thoughts on the state of the series overall coming into this last batch of episodes? Just give me very briefly what your opinion was of this series and whether or not you thought it was great or not, or.
I think this series, and I think this is not an uncommon opinion, I think this series is it's very on and off. Sometimes it's really great and really fun to watch, and sometimes it's a little boring, but I found that it hits the big moments the best, so I wasn't really worried about the finale. I was honestly more worried about the beginning of the season, and they actually kind of nailed it, they did really well for the beginning of the season, and so I was actually really going into these last few episodes really excited, because if they got the beginning moments of this season really good, I was really going to be excited about these last ones, because they really nailed the last 3 finales, even though they were, I think, less interesting than this finale so far. And I don't know, this is my expectations were high, and they kind of exceeded them.
Yeah. I think I think Rebels' biggest weakness is its consistency, especially in season 1, season 2. It really struggled relying on things of previous Star Wars films and shows to make things interesting. But when it gets things right, it's at times, sometimes some of the best Star Wars you can get, because it's really they really nail it when they need to nail it. So, I mean, I'm a fan of the show. I've always been a fan of the show, but especially since season 3, they've really stepped it up. And I really do think that has a lot to do with the villain, because in the previous ones, the villains, you can argue that, yes, Vader's a villain, but he's barely there because he's Vader, and they can't overuse him, you know?
Well, no, and the bigger problem with Vader is that they can't beat Vader because he's Vader.
Exactly.
There's a lot of problems with these shows like Rebels. Clone Wars was okay. They could introduce all these characters, and I'm talking about the show. Yeah. They could introduce all these new villains and characters that they could defeat because the villains could lose. But in this show, we know how it has to end in some ways. And so that puts a lot more, it makes it a lot harder to write. But once you get to season 3, you introduce Thrawn, and now you have a villain who we have no idea how it's going to end up, because he's not in the movies right now. So we don't know what's going to happen to him, and that makes it so much more interesting.
And not just that, but I mean, we had the Inquisitors, right?
Yes.
But they very clearly made them, because they were so related to Vader, and they made them so intricately below the big bad, that there was never any super big tension with them. No. And then again, we know Vader is gonna exist. You can't beat Vader, and that's why when Ahsoka was introduced in season 2, that's when everyone was like, "Oh God, what's gonna happen to Ahsoka?" Because they're gonna fight, and we know that Vader always wins. So that's why, for me, I think Thrawn has been one of the best things to happen to this show. And yeah,
I just want to say, despite the fact that he's not just a new character, he's actually really good.
He's if anyone hasn't read I've just started reading Heir to the Empire, which is this is really deep Star Wars stuff, but it's from the expanded universe that technically isn't canon anymore. And this is when Thrawn was first introduced. You read 1 or 2 chapters into this, and you already get the inspiration. Thrawn is already there and explored, and it's great. He's one of the best characters from coming from a book or from something that isn't the movies. he's definitely one of the most interesting characters. So if you don't want to read, just like Wikipedia him and just read up on him. He's really interesting as a character.
Yeah, I have not read the books, but I knew about Thrawn, and I knew that he's kind of like, in my head, I view him as kind of like the Star Wars version of Khan from Star Trek. Like, he's just this incredible tactician, and you just always have to think like 50 steps ahead or he's going to catch you off guard. Like, and I think they really did it well in this show. Like, he always feels like he has a plan and he's just not going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, really excited so far. And let's get into these episodes because there's a lot to talk about.
We did actually talk about them.
Yes. Again, we're diving straight into spoilers. So again, you've been warned. Let's talk about episode 10, Jedi Knight. This is the first episode back after this like small winter break that the show took. And what a way to come back. I mean, do we just want to talk about it? Like the big thing that happens? Should we just go into it, or do you want to like work from beginning to end?
I kind of work from beginning to end because I think this episode really sets it up well. I want to talk about the setup for it.
All right. So we start with Kanan meditating. And we hear these voices of things that sound familiar, but we may not have heard of. Are they from the future? Are they from the past? What's going on? We hear all these voices, and suddenly he meets eyes with a loth wolf way in beyond in the desert. And then Ezra comes in and he tells Ezra, look, we need to go save Hera because that's where we left off with Hera in the hands of the Empire. And he tells Ezra, you need to be the one in charge of this mission. I care too much about Hera. I can't be the leader in this. So I want to first ask, without going into what happens, he knows, right? He knows what's going to happen.
Yes, he knows at this point, and that's clear. And that was clear when I was watching it. Like, I knew how this was going to end, but it was still played so well. The way that
you knew this was going to happen when it happens. Like, you knew.
Yes.
Okay,
and
interesting.
I knew at this moment. I was sending you notes as I was watching, and I think it was clear that I caught that moment, but I guess at the time I wasn't sure if this was a drop for this episode or the next one. I felt like it was unclear whether this was going to be an end of the episode thing or a end of the season thing. Like,
yeah.
But it was very clear that he knew how this was going to end, how his story was going to end here.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, cut to Hera being tortured by the Empire. And that was hard.
It was. I thought they were going to mess with her head permanently. I thought she was going to turn into like what was the guy's name from season 1 with the thing on his head?
Yeah, Zebo.
Yeah, I thought her head was going to be all messed up like Debo's.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also interested because that's the first time we finally learn how the interrogation probe works. No?
Yeah.
Cause I don't know why, but in my head, when I saw that in A New Hope with Leia, I thought that for some reason that needle went somewhere near the eye or the head. So I was always freaked out by that thing.
Yes.
This makes it look like she's injected in the chest.
Yeah, but I was really, even though it seemed like it was an injection, it really, like, the shot of the thing coming forward looked like it was going for her eye, and I was just
Does it? I thought it was going for her chest. So I was like, oh my god, it's not the eye, thank god.
Well, I mean, like, at first it does, then it goes for the chest. I mean, for like a split second, the animation looks like it's going for the eye, but, I don't like things going near eyeballs, just in general.
Yeah, it's just I didn't wear contacts for a reason, and that's why I just don't get near my eyes. But yeah, so we learn through this like scene of interrogation and that Hera had a brother who died early. Mm-hmm. I mean, did we learn that before? A lot of things are blurring in for me, but I thought that was like a new revelation.
I think that's a new revelation, but again, that could have been touched on in one of her like family episodes.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be weird if it weren't, but then at the same time, it's like, well, like for most of her thing, it's always been about her mom. So I was like, oh, she had a brother? What happened? But
it's also not unusual for the Star Wars shows to like skip over details like this.
That is true. That is true. It all happens in the background. It all happens in some like single issue comic book that we will get eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the crew as the crew prepares their plan to get her, they decide to glide. They decide to use these gliders, which is random. I love it, but random.
It's pretty great. I love these things. All the things that happen in these 4 episodes, this is the thing that I'm okay with. I like these stupid gliders.
But at the same time, I'm like, this is a nod to Nausicaa, right?
It looks a lot like that, yeah.
It's like, it's totally, like, because I saw a lot of Mononoke with the wolves, so this is a nod to Nausicaa. It has to be, because it's so out there. Like, I love it, but it's so not, it kind of feels like, you know, in The Legend of Korra, when at the end with Kuvira, they become these, like, fly machine things, these wasp things. So, I thought of it like that. It's like, it's a clever thing, but it's not something that you would logically think of doing. It's just purely like, oh, this would be a cool visual, and so let's use that. So I don't know. That's the only thing that kind of...
I think the gliders made a little more sense when you saw them in the air at night with the other actual flying creatures. Like, they made the Loth bats. I hate that everything on this planet starts with Loth, for the record.
But had they mentioned Loth bats before?
I don't believe so.
That's why.
It's sometimes unclear, to be honest, when they're in the earlier episodes, when they're on Lothal and when they're not. Like, so they might have shown up and they might not have. Like, I'm not 100% sure. So it could be they showed up in the background once or twice, but I might have thought it was a different planet.
Right. Okay, all right, fair. The only little thing that threw me was like, wow, that's kind of random. Oh, now there are these Loth bats. Okay, not as random, but also where were these Loth bats before? Yeah. But
of all the Deus Ex Machinas, that's the one that's like, you're adding animals to the world. Like, I think I'm okay with that.
But yeah, exactly. Because it's not so crucial to the main things in the story, it's like, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. But yeah, and so they decide to go, but before that, Kanan gets a haircut.
Yes. And you saw my reaction to this live. I said, oh no, shaved Kanan is hot.
I don't know. I kind of wished he would have instead gone for like maybe a man bun or something. Oh, yeah. I feel like that would have been a little bit more like interesting. I understand the whole like image of like cutting your hair, so letting go. I get it.
Did you see the 5th season of Samurai Jack?
The newest one?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
There's a scene. There's a scene in that season where Jack shaves, and it really reminded me of this. It was very reminiscent of the scene where Jack re-becomes the samurai from the original seasons, and this really reminded me of it. And the tonal shift from Kanan really matched that to me. And I'm curious whether they looked at that and said that's a really cool visual, him shaving in that. It was just, if you look at the two scenes side by side, they're very similar to what I'm trying to say.
Okay, cool. I mean, for me, I just instinctively thought of Mulan.
I mean, yeah.
Instinctively, I was like, all right, here's the Mulan moment. But
we need the heavy rain and like the music in the background, though.
I mean, I will not be satisfied until Christina Aguilera is singing in the background. I will not be satisfied. But yeah, so they go and infiltrate this base, and while they're on their way, we get an image of where are we? We get the scene with Tarkin talking to Thrawn. And this is something I really appreciate, because unlike, say, the Loth bats that kind of came out of nowhere, this is a really good way of getting Thrawn off the planet. So Tarkin tells Thrawn, we get a Rogue One reference. He's like, look, Krennic from Rogue One and his Project Stardust, we know that's the Death Star. Like, they just made this, like, really great, like, meeting. It's like office politics, which I low-key love. He's like, look, they just made this really great, like, presentation, and now the Empire wants to invest on that project. You have to come to Coruscant and present to us your project and tell us why it's worth investing in. Which I adore this, because it's like, great, it makes sense, great way for Thrawn to be off-world while all this is happening. So, because you know that if he were here, this would not have gone down the way it did. And it shows how, I don't know. I just love office politics in the Empire because it's like, of course, you guys, of course, it's through petty drama internally that everything goes to poop, you know?
Like, aside from the office drama, this also really nails down the time that we're at in the story. And that is, I did not realize just how close we were to New Hope at this point, because in season 3 when we see Obi-Wan and he's looking at Luke, it felt like the distance shot when we see Luke running to the house, it always looked like Luke was a lot smaller, but I guess he's ready, he's full grown at this point. I did not realize that. Yeah,
I mean, because if you think about it, when we saw Leia, she was like Jesus' twin. So I mean, that was a shot, that shot of Luke that you're talking about did feel a little off to me because he should be older.
Yes.
He did seem a little bit young in that shot. But, I really love that. And I love, again, Tarkin taking over saying that he doesn't believe in the Death Star, knowing full well that he takes over and takes credit for it. I love that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. I guess the other part of it is just that Thrawn, like, when I think of these office things, I think of it like, how, like, when one person gives a presentation, like you were saying, it's like, now give the same one to my friend here. Like, I need you to keep doing it because I love this presentation where you talk about killing an entire planet. Please keep telling us. We need to hear more. Basically.
So, the crew infiltrates the Empire territory unnoticed thanks to the gliders. And Kanan has a foreboding conversation with Ezra before they split up. This is when I was like, okay, something's about to go down. Like, this was the moment.
This is actually where, I noted it when I was messaging you, is where I started to think I was wrong, because when a show calls out a death flag, because this is what this is. When someone says something foreboding, like it will serve you in the future, like that's a death flag. Like when someone says something like that, and Ezra called it out immediately, not in the jokey, kitschy way of like, oh, don't say stuff like that before we fight. It was more like, what do you mean? And it felt like a normal response. And I was just like, is this not happening then? Does he mean something different? So I was a little confused about what was going to happen at the end of this episode with this conversation happening now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. 'Cause I still, like, after episode 13, I was pleased with how everything went down. But when I was watching this episode, I thought, if they do, I couldn't believe they were actually going to do it. I was like, I would expect this to be something as part of the finale, not as something part of the lead up to the finale.
And that's why I thought, like, this was just like build up to the finale. I thought that Kanan was getting ready. He was like, I forget what show. There's a show I'm thinking of, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, where the main character goes around and like says goodbye to everybody. Like it's a common trope where where the person who's going to die goes around, talks to people, says his goodbyes, and then moves on. But I thought this was going to be an arc-long goodbye thing. Like I thought he was going to be saying goodbye to people as he went, but it was just shoved into this one episode, and we're going to get to another one coming up really soon.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, so they split up, and but the last thing Kanan says to Ezra and Sabine, "May the Force be with you both." And I'm like, no.
Yeah, no. That was the moment I realized, yep. And I don't think we need to hide, like, we're not really like hiding the spoiler here, but like, this is the moment I knew he was dead. Like, this is the moment I'm like, oh yeah, he's just dead. There's no way.
Even when it actually happens, I was like, there's no way. They're actually gonna do this? There's no way. Which is like, it really is a testament to how well they've been building us up throughout the entire season, which is like, there's no way. Or just the creation of this character. You never think Kanan is gonna go. And then there he is. And it's like, oh my God. Anyway.
Yeah, we need to get there.
We'll get there. But basically, Kanan goes and saves Hera. And it's a wonderful thing. We get this wonderful cue of, that kind of theme of Star Wars. That's always when something heroic happens. That's the music that's always played. And surprise, he saves her Kalikori. But we don't see him go and steal it back, but he goes, like, I got you a present. And it's like, oh no! It's so bad. Hera's response to it, though, which is,
Oh my
but this is mine. This isn't a
Yeah,
present if it's already mine.
Because she's a high on truth serum. Oh my god.
Basically.
I think it's an argument that this whole scene, starting with Hera getting the truth serum and seeing Kanan like coming down the window, that and then him saving her, that entire scene is probably the most Star Warsian thing this entire show has ever done. Because as soon as I realized that this was being played for laughs, like the truth serum, like I said, I thought it was like a permanent damage thing, like Depot. Like, as soon as I realized it was a humor thing, like, this is one of the funniest scenes they've ever done. And it's also one of the most heroic things. It really felt like a Han and Leia scene, and it was just incredible.
I mean, Leia said, it's no joke. This is the same, like, her response to him being like, I hate your hair. It's a similar kind of humor to when Luke and Leia meet in The Last Jedi. Okay, spoilers for The Last Jedi. I mean, seriously, if you haven't seen that movie, I can't help you. When, they finally reunite, and she goes, I know what you're gonna say. I changed my hair. I just love that kind of humor. I just love hair-related humor in Star Wars, because that, I don't know, for some reason for me, that always reminds me of Carrie Fisher. Yeah. So it's always like, I don't know. That was just a very Carrie moment for me.
It was.
I just adored it.
That and her, like, going on about, like, the two stormtroopers in front of her. It's like, I wonder how he's gonna do it. Yeah. Like, you guys are in trouble. And they're just like, what is she talking about?
Yeah. And she's like, Kanan's here. And the lady goes, you're delusional.
Yeah, no, like, it's amazing. Not to mention Kanan, like, this is one of the, like, Kanan, like, I've always kind of I've been unclear of how strong he is. Like, this episode is like, he is a Jedi Knight, like, for real. Like, his power has kind of been fluctuating a lot, but this episode, he was just the bee's knees every moment he was on screen.
Yeah. I mean, I will say one thing that, for the most part, the show has been really good at, but in this episode, I was a little, I mean, it kind of makes sense later, but I had a little bit of trepidation toward, is that, he's still blind, and he's not acting as if he can't see. You know what I mean? There isn't, like, they've been really good with him. Say, for instance, whenever he's talking to someone, he's not meeting their eye. Yes. He's looking straight ahead. So even if he's aware that they're there, he feels their presence through the Force, it's still present that he can't see. Yeah. And in this episode, whenever he's talking to Hera, in that moment, he's looking at her face. Like, he's looking at her. And I
think I think that was supposed to be
a hint, I know.
A hint towards the end thing, which I think we're going to talk about, because I don't like that thing that happens at the very end.
Yeah, but, I mean, I could see that being controversial.
But I think everything other than the stuff with Hera, like the fighting stuff, he fights like he's blind, but has like a Toph ability. It's really cool, and I like it. But it's not like what I was thinking of. Oh, it's not like the episode with Sabine where he's training her in the Darksaber. There's a shot, a long shot of him training with Sabine, and he's setting up camp for her when he's teaching her how to use the Darksaber, where he's holding a shipping manifest, like he's reading it. And I'm like, guys, he's blind. What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's on screen for like 2 seconds, and I'm like, guys, what are you doing? There's nothing like that in this episode.
Fair. And I mean, yes. Absolutely. But yeah, so they escape and the Empire base goes on lockdown. And this is something I really like, which is that you hear the alarm of that Rogue One teaser. You hear it for a very brief second. You know what I'm talking about?
No. I didn't make the connection when I was watching, but now that you've said it, I know what you're talking about.
Which I really, and again, we're going to be seeing this a lot in these 4 episodes, but I really, really love how they're incorporating a lot of sound from the other Star Wars films and the shows, because it's also reminding you, like, that's what Rebels is supposed to be, is that link between the prequels and the original trilogy. And we're getting so close to the actual movies time-wise that incorporation of these sounds, I'm just like really loving.
But it's like, it also builds into episode 13, like all these hints at the other parts. Like, I feel like you're supposed to be thinking about all the other Star Wars media as we're leading into this 13th episode.
Totally.
I didn't realize it was doing that until the 13th episode started, that it was like, oh, we're supposed to be thinking, where is the timeline here? Where are we? What is happening? When is everything happening? And it was really, really well done in retrospect.
Yeah. I mean, that's why these 4 episodes in particular really stand out. They're very heavily linked together.
Yes, surprisingly so.
Yeah, exactly. Because you'd expect them to be like 2 episodes separated and just very contained stories as of when they air. But in fact, how they are all very intricately linked is just very refreshing. Because that's not usually what you expect.
Honestly, it feels like a 4-part finale. We'll dig into it later, but I don't know how this isn't a finale. It just, yeah. I don't get how it is.
This could have stood on its own as a finale. Like, it
really
and
we could have gotten another season. And they might have been planning that. They might have planned that this could be they could be like just putting on a, anyways,
I don't know, because I mean, we're so close to A New Hope and they can't go during A New Hope. That can't be happening. Well, it could, but I don't know. I think the plan was always to end right before A New Hope.
We'll talk about it in episode 13 because that introduces some things. But
okay, all right.
Anyway,
all right.
Let's get to the moment here.
Okay, we'll get to the moment. But I just want to briefly say, as Hera and Kanan are escaping on a glider because it's on lockdown. They have to run away. They've been found, so they go on a glider and wait. They basically glide to the fuel depot.
Yep.
And Kanan says, the kids. Like, I love when they mention, it was the kids' idea, or, this.
I like how this implies that he includes Zeb in the kids. Like, I love that so much. Because Zeb tries so hard to not be with Sabine and Ezra and everything, but he clearly is grouped together with them every chance that they get.
Yeah. I don't know. I just love that kind of imagery of family and the kids and I just love it. But yeah, so they go to the fuel depot and wait for Ezra and Sabine, who during this moment were undercover as TIE fighter pilots, or just pilots, Empire pilots. And they steal a transport and they go meet up with Hera and Kanan. And it happens. So they're on top of this.
Before we get to the depressing thing, can I just say what before we get there? I think this episode again is just really funny, and I love the backup pilot line from Ezra. Yeah. That's a great line. I'm the backup pilot, so I'm in the back. This whole episode is really funny, and it really surprised me how funny this episode is.
Because sometimes they tend to be a little bit on the nose with their humor, but this time it really played out well. Like, sometimes the humor doesn't pay off well, but in this episode it really does.
They just hammed it up so far that it just looped back to being just Star Wars. It's great.
Exactly. But yeah, so Ezra and Sabine with this transporter go and pick them up, and they're on top of this fuel depot. So they're just on top of basically potential explosives. And I'm already like, oh God, oh no. And the Empire, they bring out these walkers, and Governor Price, who is the woman who's left in charge after Thrawn leaves, she tells her troops to fire at the fuel depot. And everyone's like, but the fuel. And she's like, I don't care, fire. They fire. What happens when you mix weaponry and fuel? Explosion. And the big moment happens where Kanan uses the Force to, oh, wait, we can't get into this yet. Dude, we forgot. Hera and Kanan, the I love you declaration.
Oh.
Yeah. Also.
That happened.
That happened. But
in your defense, like, I was honestly surprised that they weren't together already. Like,
that's exactly. How have they not said it before?
She's called him love and dear multiple times in the show that I didn't realize that they weren't together. Like, when I was binging the show, because I was trying to like remember stuff to catch up so we could do this, I was trying to catch up and get there, and I was like, are they together? Because I forget. So I checked Hera's Wikipedia page because I was trying to figure out if they were like a thing, and the whole article was talking about Hera in the past tense, and I thought I got spoiled that she was gonna die in this thing.
Oh no.
And it's just like, I was like watching this entire finale, this entire 4 episodes thinking she was gonna die. And it just, I was like, oh no. But,
but okay, maybe it's because I've seen, Star Wars, what's it called? It's, that web series of Star Wars, Forces of Destiny.
Yeah.
And Hera, is this a spoiler? I mean, it's out. It's been out.
Go ahead.
So Hera appears in, like, she talks to Han Solo in return, like, in after Return of the Jedi, there's like a scene after the original trilogy, but while they're still with the Ewoks, there's a scene where Hera and Han are like talking.
That's interesting.
So she's alive.
I've been meaning to watch that.
It's fun. It's like a very like fun little
Doesn't
thing.
Sabine have one of the shorts about her?
Yeah. There's a lot with Sabine. There's some with Padme. It's a fun thing to watch.
Sabine really came into herself in these past 2 seasons. I really like it.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm really happy with it.
She has been, in my opinion, she is one of the most interesting characters of the crew. Like,
yeah.
Again, maybe slightly biased, but the whole like Mandalorian thing, like that to me, that's like Game of Thrones. Like that's what it is. And I'm surprised that they haven't really they haven't been like talking about, say, like a movie in Mandalore. Like that is their screen, that's there for them to take.
Everyone loves the Mandalorians, like since the original trilogy. But the bigger issue is that Sabine was it's crazy that they didn't give her a bigger part in the first 2 seasons, considering it seems like she was designed to be a fan favorite, and then they just gave her nothing. It was really strange. Basically.
And I mean, well, we can talk about how like I think it's a mistake that she isn't given. I understand why she can't be the leader of like Mandalore that unites everybody, because then she can't be in the finale. But at the same time, like it should have been her. She should have been the one to do it.
Her with the Darksaber was great. Like I love. Anyway, this is going back a couple seasons because we haven't gotten the chance to talk about it. But I love her with the Darksaber. It's great.
Honestly, like Trials of the Darksaber is one of my favorite episodes.
That's what I was talking about. Trials of the Darksaber. Where there was that visual strangeness, but no, that whole fight with her and that whole episode's great without getting into it.
Absolutely, but yeah, okay. So they kiss, it happens. Then the big thing happens where there's an after the Empire shoots the fuel depot. There's this big explosion, and Kanan uses the Force to contain it,
which is really cool.
Absolutely cool. Like, and it shows you, like, here's the thing. I don't know if it's because he is so close to death, so he is so close to the Force and becoming the Force, that it's at the moment of death that a Jedi is the most powerful.
Is that a thing?
I think it should be a thing. If it's not a thing, I think it's a thing. Maybe
it's probably a thing. It makes, like, you saying it sounds right, so I'm sure it is right.
And not just that, but I mean, like Obi-Wan said, strike me down and I will become far more powerful than you, or whatever that line is. But that's all he's talking about after, like once he becomes one with the Force. But what if like leading up to it is when a Jedi becomes their most powerful?
Going back to The Last Jedi, that's when Luke is the most powerful.
Exactly. Is right before he passes. So it's kind of like, that it makes sense. I don't know if anyone's ever said it, but it makes sense.
It's interesting the parallels between obviously all the Jedi that have died. It's between Kanan and all the Jedi that have died, because I think he more closely mirrors Luke's death than he mirrors any of the others.
Oh, totally. Like he doesn't I don't think like Yoda kind of went peacefully.
Yeah.
Whereas with Obi-Wan, it was much more passive. It was much more like peaceful in terms of like, I'm not going to attack you. It's much more defensive, I guess.
But Luke went out saving people, specifically to save people, and so did obviously Kanan.
Yeah. So I mean, Kanan has this wonderful moment where because Hera obviously comes to get him, and he pushes her away, and he basically pushes her into the transport, then pushes the transport away, all with one hand, while the other hand is holding off the explosion. I mean,
that shot is incredible with him like one-handed both directions.
Yeah,
it's really
incredible. Yeah, and there's the moment that can be possibly controversial in that he looks back at Hera and his eyes become healthy again.
Yeah,
and he sees her before he passes. Now,
I don't like this.
Okay, look. Let me just, in defense of it, as a romantic, how romantic is it that the last thing he sees is Hera? Like
Beatriz.
Okay, essentially he's becoming one with the Force. We saw that Obi-Wan, he doesn't actually perish, he just disappears. So you can make the argument that he is in transition to disappearing, and he's not going to be blind as a Force ghost, so he's just, it's like as he's disappearing, he's like regaining his sight because he's becoming one with the Force. So my thing. But that's my defense of it.
I get it, and I love romantic stuff. I love those I love dumb romantic crap. It's the best. It is. But I think that it feels more like what he wants than what he deserves, if that makes sense. It feels like it doesn't, and I think we're getting into this discussion later in the next episode. It feels a little too fantastical to me. And honestly, this feels more unbelievable than some of the stuff that happens in episode 12. And I don't necessarily like that it happens. I think that it would have been better if he just passed and he was looking on at her with his blind eyes. And you could imagine that as he died, he became a Force ghost and could see again. But I don't like that the show explicitly says it. I think it would have been better if he just kind of like widened his eyes as it became clear that he could see again, but without showing his eyes actually becoming a different color. Gotcha.
So do you think had it been a little bit less obvious that was happening visually, it maybe would have been have him expressively express shock over now he can see her again. But I
think a better way to do it would have been Hera reflecting in his eyes. Okay. Because there's all that fire, there was all this light. I think they could have really used it well to have just her reflect in his eyes, and I feel like that'd be a little more subtle way to do it. And then this is a cinematography thing. This is nitpicking, to be honest. Yeah. But I think that it could have been done better. But obviously, this was done very well. This whole scene.
Gotcha. I mean, my biggest thing is also I don't like the. Granted, he's about to die, and as I've said, it's because he's about to become one with the Force, so it kind of makes sense in the mystical way, but at the same time, I also don't want this to be taken as evidence that, say, someone loses their ability to see or to hear or to anything, then suddenly if they work hard, if they become strong enough in the Force, it's fine. You know what I mean? I don't want that to be something, it's a little bit ableist, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I think it more just goes, even without going into that stuff that you're talking about just there at the end, it goes against a lot of what Vader's story is. If you actually can heal people with the Force. It just kind of goes against the idea that, because Kanan is the epitome of a Jedi at his end. He is totally in the light side. He really does believe all these things, and the fact that he heals himself with the light side of the Force, it doesn't really click with me. If this was somebody who was neck deep in the dark side, I actually would buy this a little bit more, honestly.
Yeah, that's why, I love the sentiment, I love the meaning, I just don't want this to be used as
it's precedent.
Exactly. I don't want it to set a precedent. I want it to just be this one-off thing, and that it can only happen when you're about to become one with the Force, And
I'd be okay with that. I'm just worried. I guess I am worried about the precedents. Now that I'm thinking about all my complaints, I think precedents is the same thing I'm worried about.
Yeah. But yeah. So that was the death of Kanan Jarrus.
Which is set up for the next 3 episodes that we now have to talk about.
Basically. All right. So let's get into episode 11 then, because this is essentially just the aftermath. Yeah. This is basically after episode 11, Doom, and it starts with the state of the Empire after this explosion. They lose all of their fuel, and the Governor Price, she goes, "I don't care. I killed a Jedi. That's worth it for me. And let's set up a parade to hide the fact that we're very weak at the moment."
I think, to be honest with you, Governor Price is #relatable. I just killed a Jedi. Don't bother me. I just killed a Jedi.
Basically. And then I just love how the sheer arrogance she has, thinking that Thrawn isn't going to find out about this. It's girl, it's Thrawn. Of course he's going to find out about this.
If this was Tarkin, he would never figure out. But Thrawn's going to know the second he looks at you that something's wrong.
Exactly. But yeah, so they decide to throw a parade.
Yeah.
And we, props to the show, because a lot of times after something big like a death happens, they jump a couple years. They don't deal with the aftermath. They just kind of jump forward in time a little bit. But no, we see we straight up, it doesn't stop. It goes straight to cut to them arriving back and Zeb being like, where's Kanan? And then everybody just like,
this made me really excited for the episode, knowing that we weren't going to just gloss over this straight to like flying away from I always forget the name, Lothal.
Yeah.
I really thought we were just going to cut to this episode. We were flying away from Lothal, and we weren't really going to touch on this, like the immediate aftermath, because I think a lot of shows talk about like grief after you've had that first moment, but not a lot of shows go over grief you have in the moment it happens, which is really this episode really dives down into, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and Star Wars in general doesn't really deal with grief that much.
No.
It's like you have, like, for instance, when Ben dies, you don't see, like, the anger. Like, you don't see the, like, Luke doesn't stay in that grieving period for long. It's like there's just too much happening. Whereas I think only here and maybe with Rey in The Last Jedi with Han, like maybe like there's where we're dealing with grief and reaction to it and stuff, but
I mean, even then there was a jump with Rey. There was a big jump with Rey, honestly.
Yeah. So I mean, there was a lot of other stuff happening with Rey. Like I feel like with the movies, there's this like very tight sense of time where everything's happening really fast. Yeah. Whereas with here, like they really slowed down. They're like, no, let's explore how each particular character reacts to this loss, and love that Sabine and Zeb are just like mad. They're just like, no, we're getting revenge, which is not the Jedi way, but they're not Jedi. So they're just like, no, let's take something back from them. So they go off. Yeah.
And I really liked that. I think the word I'm looking for these 4 episodes is restraint, because in a lot of Star Wars things, like Clone Wars really could lean on the fact that they could have an action scene every episode. They could have this random action that just looked really cool, this cool set piece. This show really can't do that, and I think it benefits it, because even when there is a fight, it's not always just a lightsaber duel or just a shootout. It has to be different because there aren't a lot of Jedi and Sith to work with here. There aren't a lot of just rebels that they can just kill off to fill an action scene. It really makes everything a lot more personal, and I think it really pays off in these 4 episodes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because as I was watching 4 episodes, I was thinking, we can't have a lightsaber duel, and that gets shown later how they solve that problem. We can't have a lightsaber duel. We can't have a big mech thing because this is a small town in Lothal. Like, this is a small town. We can't have like walkers and stuff. But they found a way they made it personal, like they did in season 3 of Korra. They went from this big stuff to these really small things that really affected people personally, and I really commend them for doing that.
Totally. It makes the characters all the more complex, and it gets you more invested in them. Yeah,
because I think that this villain in this episode is not the strongest, but Zeb and Sabine really sell it.
Yeah, because it's not about. This is something that it's like a page out of Marvel's book, which is it's not about the villain. It's never like rarely is the villain the strong part of the story. It's the hero and what the hero grows out of this experience. Yeah. And with Zeb and Sabine, it's just learning what differentiates them from the Empire is that they're not willing to go that far. They're like, they have the anger, but they also know when to pull back, which is like really nice. But yeah, so while Sabine and Zeb, but they also important, Sabine and Zeb are the ones to figure out, like we actually succeeded our mission. So that's what they're doing. Ezra is going with the wolves on this. Like he is very much alone in this. He's very much in like, very lost, doesn't know what to do. And this is when my theory happens. This is like when I first get a hint of, the Kanan is now a wolf. This is my theory. Like he's a wolf now. Like that's his thing, right?
These are Force ghosts. These are like, this is this show's version of Force ghosts, essentially.
Basically. So Kanan, like Ezra's lost, and then suddenly all these wolves surround him, and he confronts them, and he doesn't know what they want, but they offer to give him, they give him the guidance that Kanan usually gives him. And that's when I first had that inkling of, oh, Kanan, you're a wolf now, aren't you? And we see this because on top of the wolves we already meet, Ezra for the first time meets this mega wolf. Is the proper term, I guess.
Is that the official Wikipedia definition of it? Mega
I don't
wolf?
know. No, I don't. Star Wars isn't like a mega show. Like they don't use the word mega. I don't think
they use super a fair bit.
Super enormous, star destroying wolf. I don't know. he's a big wolf appears that tells him, I am Doom. I'm curious to see who voices him, because if Freddie Prinze Jr. voices him, then like for sure it's Kanan.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I can look that up while you're summarizing.
Yeah. Okay, so he meets him and basically Ezra just like pours out all he's feeling. He's like, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. My master I need my master. Like, where is he? Well, I know where he is. And then the wolf, Kanan, in my opinion, brings him like this rock from the Jedi temple and tells him that he must restore the past, redeem the future. Now watching this, it kind of went over my head. I was just like, what? What's happening? Like, I was too strung up on the fact that I think Kanan is this wolf that I wasn't really listening to what he was saying. And then rewatching it after watching the next 2 episodes, it all kind of falls very neatly together. It's just, all these 4 episodes are very well planned out in that sense.
They are.
Very well planned out.
There's clearly the best episodes of any show are when there's a clear thematic through line, and this one has these 4 episodes have an amazing through line that I was just not expecting.
Yeah, exactly. And so we get this rock from him, and through this wolf, he gets his new mission for the group, which is save the Jedi Temple. So Zeb and Sabine are the ones who find out the state of the Empire and the state of the Empire on Lothal. And Ezra's the one who goes, okay, now I know our next step, which is we gotta save the Jedi Temple. And while all this is happening, we have Hera.
Oh, God.
That was heartbreaking. We have Hera, who isn't necessarily doing anything because she needs time for herself. So I kind of like that she's not like doing something that moves the plot forward. It's much more about character and it's much more about her. And she's just, she's mourning. She blames herself. She blames herself for getting Kanan in this situation. And I love that it's Chopper who's with her. Like, because we know the story of Chopper, where he was just like Hera saved him when he was just a tin out in space because he thought because his old pilot died. So the fact that Hera, the fact that he has this loyalty, the sense of loyalty towards Hera, it just really, I don't know. I'm just like, Chopper, you're so Chopper. Stop it. Chopper
is low-key the best character in this show sometimes.
Very low-key. Low-key is. Not gonna deny it.
Like, it's really weird to think that because he's essentially like the Momo character, but it's really...
Basically.
But I'm also surprised because this show, like, when they thrust Hera into a really archetypal thing where the female love interest, after the death of their love interest, they hold themselves up into a room and essentially sit in the darkness and brood a bit, which, again, I'm not judging her for doing that, but it's usually a character that doesn't do anything anyways. But because it's Hera, who we had just seen being General Hera for 4 straight episodes, like, she was incredible. She was awesome. Just, she killed so many stormtroopers and fought off so many people alone. Like, that entire scene in the capital of Lothal where she's taking on walkers and driving cars into legs and stuff, like, that is awesome. She's awesome. And I think that difference between that Hera and this Hera really makes this scene pop a lot more. Yeah,
totally. And also, like, she is the one character who's always been like about the rebellion, always been like, no, we have to keep going. She's always been that voice. So the fact that she's the one now that needs to take a moment just really kind of shows you how big, like, how not only how important Kanan is to her, because we know that, but how she's never had this moment before, how we haven't seen this from her before, and the fact that now, I don't know, it just makes it all the more tragic, I feel. And also like that suggestion from Chopper to put Kanan in the Kalikori and continue that legacy. I don't know. I just found that to be very touching, very sweet. And yeah, so basically after she makes that decision, she becomes ready to fight again. And the crew comes together, and now they have their new mission. And I don't know, it's just this lovely, yes, in this episode, it's still like set up. It's a lot of tying off loose ends. It's very much the aftermath of something crazy that happens. But even then, I feel like it was a very needed episode because we did need this kind of moment to breathe, to recuperate, and for everybody to kind of like just settle. Not just us, the viewer, but like they themselves, like as a rebellion, they needed to gather up again and regather their strength. And we see that in this episode. And I really enjoyed it.
We really, more episodes of Rebels need these kinds of episodes following them. But the problem is, and I really like that this is not a finale, and I think this is why it does so well, is because most of the big moments like this in Rebels are finales. So the next episodes after them have to be premieres. So we can't have these small moments be premieres. We need these big moments. And I think that's why I like the season 3 premiere the best, because it has those quiet moments with Kanan and Bendu. But this is not a premiere or a finale. So we really have the time to just have almost no action here. Because the fight with, I don't know the creature's name. I don't know its name.
I just call him the assassin.
Yeah, the assassin. Like, that is a fight, but it's not a high note. It's really just, it's more about watching.
It's just, yeah.
And the fact that he even goes invisible during it really emphasizes it's about Sabine and Zeb. And I really like it. I think this episode's one of my favorites of the show. Until I get to episode 13, and that was actually my favorite of the show. This is my favorite of the show for about 30 minutes, to be honest. This is my favorite episode of the show for 30 minutes.
Well, and let's talk about the next episode that sets up your favorite episode.
Yeah.
Because Wolves and a Door.
Yeah.
Whenever someone incorporates 2D animation, it immediately shoots up my list of like things that I enjoy. So I love this. I love it, but at the same time, it's like, it's hard for me to see episode 12 as its own thing without episode 13 because it's literally the setup for 13. Like 13 would not make sense without 12, and 12 would not be worth not much happening without 13 as the payoff.
But again, I think this is what I was talking about restraint. This is a very restrained episode. They could have tried to have a lot more here, but they really put just enough in so 13 could be a much better episode for it.
Yeah, totally. So let's start with this journey to the temple. Because, all right, so they see this code, they see this like rock and these drawings, and they're like, okay, we gotta go to the temple. It's under Empire control. How are we gonna get there? Ezra's like, I'm gonna call my wolves up.
I got wolves, guys.
Yeah, exactly. I've got wolves. And again, a lot of Mononoke imagery with the wolves here.
Yeah.
How badly I want Filoni to just do this kind of like commentary track for Mononoke just to see like, cause if I'm correct, then he really loves Mononoke.
But it's, and I think we haven't really touched on it. This is one of the most, like, Star Wars was already more fantasy than sci-fi in my opinion, but this is really fantasy. We're getting really close to some high fantasy themes here in these few episodes.
But apparently, when Leia uses the Force, it's too much for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how everyone's like, Filoni should direct this. Like, who cares about Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson? And it's like, really? Like, this is the very thing people are mad at, but because Filoni does it in animation, it's like, okay. It's
to be honest with you, I loved the Leia stuff in The Last Jedi, and this stuff I'm much more hesitant about. I really like 13, but 12, it's a little too mystical for me at times, and I'm not sure how I feel about it.
I mean, again, because we do have, as they're traveling with the wolves, there's this they go through this, there's this like scene where it's just kind of this, it's as if you're in hyperspace in a way.
But they're going through the planet.
Yes, they're going through the planet, but visually, that's kind of the visual that we take from it, which it looks like as if we're in hyperspace. And we hear all these voices throughout the entire series of just basically Ezra and Kanan and the relationship they have with the Force. Essentially, that's what we hear all these voices from the past.
And we hear Yoda. I think there's Obi-Wan in there a couple times.
Yeah. We hear a lot of just this very much the Jedi and the Force kind of thing happening.
And I'm fine with all that. It's just the moment where the wolves just literally drop through the grass that I'm just like, this doesn't feel like Star Wars.
I will say, I watched Rebel Recon, which is this thing on the Star Wars YouTube channel that happens where they show a little bit of behind the scenes after an episode airs. So they did that for these 2 episodes, and I think it was in Rebel Recon where the host, she goes, I understand more of the
mechanics,
the world we're about to see in 13. I understand more of what's there than about how the wolves work.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like she was like, I understand more of that than I do of how the wolves work.
I agree. Which is really interesting because 13 is a very esoteric thing that happens.
Yeah. It's
maybe esoteric's not the right word, but it's very out there, a lot of the stuff that happens in 13.
Totally. I mean, if anything, like 13 is like really embracing fantasy and going into a direction of Star Wars never has gone to before.
But 13 feels more Star Wars to me than 12. It does. For some reason.
Do you think it's because it's like visually, it's like, it's a planetarium, whereas this is like wolves and animals, which is like, it's not like an alien, it's a wolf, So I
think that's part of it, but there's another reason, and I think we'll get into it when we talk about it, but it goes into the symbolism of it, I think. Because this is just like, I'm not sure, because when mystical stuff happens in Star Wars, it's usually related to the Force and related to the conflict between the Force. This, I did not get any of that. I just felt like they just suddenly did something, and I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that in my head. But I do like that when they're traveling to the planet, it's clear that it has to do with the Force. We just weren't really explained what's going on.
I look at it because remember, the wolves are the ones who open the gateway to things. Yeah. So, I mean, this is part of this episode, like the opening of the gateway.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like it's just that they've just have this, like, link to the time and space.
And I guess, but it doesn't, like, compared to the part where Kanan gets his vision back, I feel like it would have been better if this was more concrete I feel like if this would be better if it was a little more concrete what was happening. Gotcha. I would have liked that, because even when there's mysticism in Star Wars, it feels like somebody explains exactly how it's working. Or at least how they think it's working, because in 13, the entire room, I know how that room works. I get it.
I understand.
I get it the moment. Like, as soon as we go to one of the doorways there, like, I get what's happening. Here, it's like, I'm not quite sure what the wolves can't do. Like, why? Like, I think that's the biggest problem. I don't know what the wolves can't do at this point.
Understood. Okay. Fair. 100%. They are very much like, they do rely very much on, like, the magic of the Force. So they feel more magical than mystical. Maybe that's it?
Yeah, no, that's definitely it. But it's, I don't know, because it definitely, this episode is definitely trying to build up that the wolves aren't mystical. It's that they're, like, super, super high tech. Like, that's kind of what the implication is at some points here. At least the wolves on the wall.
Gotcha.
And,
okay, well, yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to go into why you have a feeling sometimes. And it's just, to me, this feels a little off.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And I do like episode 12. It's just this part makes me feel a little weird.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, something that I do like is that they're already introducing us to this kind of, since episode 10 with Kanan, like, with the voices, already we're getting this sort of, like, we're playing with time a little bit here,
then in episode, was it 9, where they, like, teleported from the northern to the southern hemisphere?
Yeah.
Like, I was more okay with that than what happens here.
But, like, here, all that happens is they just move through space and time.
Yes.
Like, it's the same thing happens, isn't it?
It is the same thing, but I'm just trying to figure out why this feels different to me. I'm trying to, because I think that's a more interesting discussion, why this is portrayed just slightly differently, but feels very different in practice.
Do you think it's because they hear these voices, and it's not just Ezra hearing these voices, it's all of them, so it's not necessarily, like, a Force-sensitive thing, it's like, or maybe it's because... Do you think it's that?
I guess it's that, because it definitely feels like here in the tunnel one, it felt like Ezra and Kanan leading the group through some Force sensitive place. And this feels more like the Force is leading them, which never feels like what the Force should be doing. The Force shouldn't be forcing things along. And it definitely feels like that's what it's doing here.
Understood.
I think,
okay.
I think we've pinpointed what my problem is, and that's it.
Okay. Gotcha. So
Sorry for that side thing.
No. That's what we're supposed to do here. But yeah, so they reach the temple, and Zeb and Hera decide to keep watch while Sabine and Ezra infiltrate the Empire-controlled temple. They hack transmissions while they're there, and we finally hear who is behind this little excavation experiment that's going on.
Yeah.
We hear the Emperor. We hear Ian McDermott. He's back as the Emperor. And Sabine's face when she hears that voice is amazing. Like, I adored it, and I love how everyone just, like, internally freaks out. Everyone's like Hera's like, we need to leave. Like, if this is something to do with the Emperor, this is too big for us. Vader, maybe. You know, like, Thrawn, okay. Emperor, no. This is a no zone.
Which is good, because the show should play up the Emperor like this, but just
Totally.
it really felt like the Emperor was a force of nature in this two-parter. Like, he was just the embodiment of the dark side, and it was great.
Yes. And I mean, and it's so nice how it's like his introduction, like immediately like this force of evil, and very quickly the next thing we see is Hera doubting it, being like, no, and who is it that reassures her? What is it, the one thing that keeps her like grounded and focused? It's the one force of good of the show for these people, which is Kanan. We see Force Ghost Kanan.
That's a moment I forgot about, actually, where she puts her hand on her shoulder.
What?
No.
You forgot about Force Ghost Kanan?
No, I've been thinking a lot more about episode 13, to be honest. 13 is where all my speculation is pointed, because this moment's really small, and I think that's good. It's small, the moment, but I think it's nice. I think it's nice that this happens. And it's interesting the appearance that he takes, because again, Force Ghosts take the appearance of what the person thinks they should look like. And it's interesting that he picks essentially season 1 Kanan. That's not what I would have expected he would have picked.
But it's interesting how it's like when he and Hera met in the last episode, it's like it's always been like, when we first met. So I kind of like first season, I don't know. That to me wasn't as big of a.
I know, but I feel like him being blind was actually him, not to be too what's the word? Not to be too like literary or whatever. Like, it feels like that was when he really opened his eyes, when he got blind, when he became very more force sensitive. And I thought that he would take on an appearance, he wouldn't be blind as a Force Ghost, but he would take on an appearance more closely that it would harken to him being blind in some way. Because that felt like a much bigger part of his identity.
Well, you can make the argument for like Vader when Anakin becomes a Force Ghost again. It's like, but you were hurt, and you were man and machine. Like, why don't you look more like older you instead of younger you? So there's also that. Yeah. But but yeah, so they decide to, like, when we see Emperor Palpatine, when we see him, not hear him, but when we see him for the first time, we get the first mention of the Mortis gods, which is something that was introduced in Clone Wars.
Yes.
So this is years ago, which in my opinion is one of my favorite episodes of Clone Wars, which is like this kind of thing.
We're okay to spoil this, right?
Yeah.
I watched this episode like years ago, and I forget how it exactly ends. I know that he kills one of the people. Did he kill the daughter?
No, I think it's that the son kills the daughter.
Okay.
But then, yeah, and I think he kills the son, maybe? It's something like that.
I know whatever happens, that people, some of the gods die. That's all I remember. Yeah. But and I remember that the daughter represented the light side.
Yeah.
The son represented the dark side, and the father was the gray, the middle.
Yeah, the gray. Yeah. Yes, and I mean, what I remember from that episode, what really stood out to me of that arc in Clone Wars was that Anakin finds out about his future.
Yes.
And he's so repulsed by it. And he's so like, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And again, it's this playing with time that we are gonna see in episode 13 where it's like, I'm just saying, there are so many time travel fan fictions in the Star Wars fan fiction page that suddenly are actually valid. That actually they're in a universe, it could happen.
But that being said, I'm glad that we destroyed the temple the second we...
Oh, totally.
Like, I'm glad it's gone now.
But that's only one temple. Maybe in other temples you could reach a similar...
I'm fine with that. But I'm glad that this one, we're not gonna have people just mucking around with time forever now.
Oh, totally. But, it's an interesting element to introduce, and it's something that's been set up since Clone Wars, which I just really, really love. And, so yeah, we see... That's when he first mentions the Mortis God. Emperor Palpatine mentions them, and he says in his conversation with his the person who works under him, he says, "The death of Kanan Jarrus has altered the fate of Lothal, though how I cannot say." And that's it. Just kind of it really solidifies the fact that Kanan more powerful in death than in life, similar to most Jedi. And it's like, is he just talking about the Jedi Temple, or is he talking about further into the season finale?
Yeah.
Where it's like, is it good? Is it bad? Like, what is about to happen? Like, him being here, like, should he have survived? Like, him surviving, would that change the fate of the Rebels or the Empire? Like, what is about to happen?
And I think it's also interesting, I didn't realize that the Emperor knew Kanan's name. Like, he knew that Kanan was a Jedi Knight. Because it's just interesting how much of an impact Kanan had on the Empire that I didn't realize.
Yeah. Same with Ezra. It's kind of like, it's these, I think more so, like, it's just really fascinating to, like, compare this to, like, season 1, where they weren't, like, well-known people, but suddenly they're making these names for themselves. And it's like, I think the only one is Zeb. I think Zeb is the one person of the crew that hasn't really, like, been like renowned outside of like his people. But know what I mean?
I think that's on purpose. I think that the showrunners didn't want to give Zeb a spotlight, which I'm okay with. Oh,
totally. He no offense to Zeb, but he isn't the most interesting.
No.
Of the characters.
Which is why it was so surprising that Sabine got a backseat for so long.
I know. I mean, for me, he was one of the most interesting of the first season, but after that I was like, okay, Zeb,
once you know his story, it's really basic.
Yeah. Yeah. But,
not that it isn't tragic or emotional,
right.
It's just not that deep.
Yes. So we see, okay, and the Emperor mentions of the power in the Jedi Temple. We must seize the power within, a conduit between the living and the dead. So again, already setting up what we're about to get into. Like, all these hints were there, but still I was so mind blown at episode 13.
Yes.
So we get Force Ghost Kanan, we get the Emperor, and then we finally get to see this kind of the actual rock where the painting of the Mortis gods is. Like, where it is, and Ezra and Sabine go as they're like dressed up as stormtroopers, and they go in and they start looking at this rock and starting to like trying to break the code as to how to open the Jedi Temple.
Yeah.
And no one's noticing them despite the floodgates being open, like not floodgates, floodlights on. Like, just no one notices them.
I think it's implied that this is a very, again, mystical thing, in that the physical changes are only seen to Ezra. Like, people see the aftermath of the changes, but they don't see the physical changes occurring. I think that's what's implied here.
No. I'm not talking about the 2D animation, which we'll get into.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about when Sabine and Ezra are just trying to figure out what it says, and they're like, well, what does it say? Well, let's look at the rock that we had. Before Ezra even touches it. No one's noticing them. There's no like cover, there's no like rocks in between them and the others. It's just one of those things where I'm like, why are they just standing there, not hiding? They're in plain sight and no one sees them.
I'm glad that Sabine got caught. I'm a little confused why Ezra
it took
didn't
them
get
so
caught.
long. Yeah, exactly. That's my big thing. That's the one little blip of kind of, I have to suspend my disbelief even more, or I'm aware of my suspension of disbelief. is like in that moment.
And Rebels does this a fair bit, and I think that's when it's at its worst, is when you're like, why are people blind, or why are people deaf, like stuff like that. And that happens. I think the worst episodes of Rebels are ones where that's the main problem, where you don't know why people don't see or hear something.
Exactly. So that's the only thing. But anyway, Sabine gets caught, but Ezra figures out how to like activate this like image, and we get this beautiful sequence of 2D animation.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite, I think that's one of my favorite like visual cues from the show, is just this incorporation of 2D animation and having this like these images come to life on the rock, and through that they open this portal.
Yeah.
And they unlock this gateway into the temple and into another world. And after Sabine gets caught, the base goes on lockdown, forcing Ezra to just dive in. Yes.
And thus begins one of the best episodes of Rebels ever. This
basically.
Can we just move right into it? Do we need? I don't think there's much to talk about with 12 here.
No. We're moving in. Let's talk about A World Between Worlds, which is the last episode of this bunch. So this world is gorgeous.
It is.
It's a planetarium, essentially.
It reminds me of the shot from Treasure Planet with that, the map.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? That it reminds me of that a fair bit, with a lot less of the stars.
Yeah. And I just love the use of like the white lines, and the use of like every time Ezra like takes a step, you see the ripple effect, and it seems so vast, and yet seems also contained.
Yeah.
Which I adore.
It's really cool. You're not sure how big this room is. Sometimes it looks like it's just a sphere, and sometimes it looks like it extends outwards forever. It's a really cool effect.
Yes, absolutely. And what made me lose my mind when we first start walking into this world with Ezra is we start hearing voices from all the Star Wars films and all the shows. I'm talking Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Rebels, The Force Awakens, and Rogue One. Like when I heard Rey, I lost my mind.
And that's like the moment you realize what this room is. It's such good show, not tell storytelling. When you hear all these voices coming in, you're like, I get what this room is. I get where Ezra is, what Ezra's going to do here. Or not what he's going to do, but you get what these doors do. It's such a cool moment. And I mean, it just really, it teased for me an animated Rey, but not in the Force of Destiny's way, but in an actual like animated series type of way, which I know we won't get until like after the trilogy ends, the new trilogy, because I don't think Rey would ever come back in movie form, not for a while at least. So the next time we see her is either in comic or animated form. And this really gave us a hint of that. And I just thought, oh my god, Rey! Imagine just an animated Rey. Again, I just love Rey a lot, so I lost my mind when I heard her. And we also heard, and this is my theory, because this is something I wasn't expecting. We heard Jyn Erso. Every other voice we heard in that world, like in that world, was Force sensitive. The only one who wasn't Force sensitive is Jyn Erso. What are they saying? That, I mean, it doesn't matter given how Rogue One ends, but what does that tell us? That Jyn Erso maybe was Force sensitive, and that's why we hear her? Maybe? I think it was more just to I think it was just more to be a scattershot attempt at making sure that everyone who's watching knows that there's something time going on here. Like I think that's just all it was. They were trying to grab as many different properties as possible to make sure people understood that this room was connected to different time, or to different parts of time. I know, but I just wish, like, say for instance, if we're gonna go like with Force sensitive, if every other speaker was Force sensitive, I would have preferred instead Donnie Yen's character from Rogue One. So instead hearing like, I am the Force and the Force is with me. Instead of hearing Jyn, if we had heard him, then maybe it would have made more sense for me, because I'm like, oh, but he is like, he's studied the Force and all that. Whereas with Jyn, it's more of like, you know, like, I don't know. I just thought for a second, why is Jyn the one not Force sensitive person we hear? Maybe she is like,
had that been the case, we would have heard Han, I think, and we didn't hear Han. So that's why I'm like, maybe there's something here. So again, just a theory. But, so we very briefly, we see this world and Ezra being like, where am I? Then we get back to the rebel world and it's back to Lothal where Sabine, I am smarter than you, Ren, just kind of teaches this guy, this like person that's working under, Palpatine a lesson. Cause she's just like, I'm not working with you in this. And I just love that her go-to line is just like, I'm smarter than you. I'm smarter than you. Like, but can't you see? I am smarter than you. But
this is one of the few episodes where I really felt like Sabine understood things that other people didn't. Cause it felt like we never really got to see it. Like the stuff she actually talked about on the screen was pretty dumbed down. But it felt like she understood things that other people didn't. And that was different than we usually see Sabine in. A different light than we usually see her in, I think.
Totally, because we usually see her, like, yes, like, we take her artistry for granted. Like, we just see it as kind of as this, like, oh, look at her, like releasing her emotions in this way. But in fact, it actually has this, like, use in that, no, she knows how to interpret art. She knows how to read meanings into things. So that's also very cool, yeah. But, while Sabine is trying to figure out how to close this and not die, Zeb and Hera are trying to figure out how to rescue her and Ezra. And basically, like, I don't know, I don't want to spend too much time with her and Zeb and Hera because that's not really what's super interesting. So that's what they're doing, and let's not talk about them for now. Let's just talk about what Ezra is doing here. He's trying to figure out what this world is, and he just follows this path up to this kind of Zelda-looking triangle thing. Yeah, or not Zelda, but like Harry Potter-looking triangle thing.
It looked very Zelda to me as well. It looked very much like a Triforce or something like that. And it had an owl sitting on top of it, like in Ocarina of Time. It was very Zelda-esque.
Okay.
It looked a lot like the, and even because Zelda has a lot of time stuff in it, where like they have these beats. It was very Zelda-esque.
Okay, cool. All right, so he sees this other gateway, and we see, and this is like, if I lost my mind with Rey, I all out screamed when I saw this, because we essentially see the Vader v. Ahsoka fight of season 2 from a different point of view.
Yeah,
which is so clever from them. Like absolutely clever from Filoni.
This is not only is this clever, it's like it's not just clever from a storytelling perspective. It's so clever from like an episode construction perspective.
Yeah.
Because it gives us a lightsaber duel for this season, because we couldn't really get one any other way. Like, we just couldn't, because there's no people for him to fight. If Ezra fights Vader, it has to be the finale and he dies, because there's no other people for him to fight. And so we get a lightsaber duel, which is still cool to see Ahsoka fighting Vader again, even if it was really short. And we also just get Ahsoka. It's incredible. This thing hits like 5 stones at once. It's so incredible.
And I mean, it just answers that question of like, what happened to her?
Yeah.
Which you think that we're never going to get? You think that we're just going to get this kind of like, oh, like something with the Force, something mystical happens, which is true. That's what happens. But like, the fact that this is what we're getting, and the fact that Ezra saves her.
Yes.
He pulls her out, and the implications of this, she has to be in the finale.
I actually have a different opinion, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay, well, even if she isn't in the finale, like, she has to, like, survive into, like, the trilogy.
She will.
So she must know about Luke. She eventually will find out about Luke and Leia.
I think, I guess I can talk about it now. There's no real other time to talk about it. I think that when we get to it later, when she jumps through the portal to a different time, I think that this is setting us up for Ahsoka's in the future. Ahsoka is somewhere in the future of this timeline. She might have just leapfrogged all the way past the original trilogy with this.
I don't know, because the thing is, like, because remember, when in season 2, we do get that last look of her in the temple, and she's going down the steps and whatever, like going into the temple further. And when we leave, when she gets pulled in, like when we last see the fight, she gets pulled into the world by Ezra. She's like she has her lightsabers out and stuff. So it's not as if that when we're watching it in season 2, like what if Had she gone in the future, we wouldn't have seen her in season 2 at the end. That little bit of her.
Well, no, we did though. We did see her a little bit because
that's what I mean. But like, had she like through that pathway gone forward in time, right, and skipped over the trilogy, then we wouldn't have seen that little bit of her in season 2 because that little bit of her is when she comes back after in the world. Does that make sense?
No, because here's how it works. She grows up. She's on a normal timeline. She goes straight from through the Clone Wars, grows up normally, through to Rebels. And she has not done any time travel, right? She's not done any time travel yet. Then, when she's fighting Vader, she gets pulled out of her normal timeline for the first time, and she's suddenly thrust into a different point in time. And what I'm saying is, what I'm theorizing is that she just jumps. There's just a break in her line. Like, there's like, how old is Ahsoka right now? I don't even know. She's at least like 25, right?
Right.
Because she's at least 10 during Clone Wars at time.
Yeah.
So she's at least 25. So I'll go with like 28 or something. So she's 28, and she has 28 years of living, and then all of a sudden she's just cut off and thrown somewhere else in the timeline. And I don't think the timeline disallows her from being thrown somewhere else to the future.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the Ahsoka we see at the end of season 2.
Yes.
That Ahsoka is the one we see right there at the end when we get that view of her going back inside the temple, when we think, is she dead? But then we see her again. That's her after she returns from that world.
Oh, right. I completely forgot about that. Oh.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't think that she goes into the future.
I see what you're saying now. I completely forgot about that shot at the end of season 2 because they thought it was like a Force ghost or something.
Right. And it's her like back from the world. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just like this. I watched season 2 finale a long time ago.
Yeah, of course. No worries.
No.
I mean, I'd be all down for like her going back to like the like Knights of the Old Republic time period and having her own adventure there. Like that sounds amazing.
I'm just looking for some way we can have Ahsoka live action. That's all. Because
but we could now. Like what?
How long does her race live? Or she's a Twi'lek, right?
No, she's not Twi'lek. She's a Tagura.
Oh, okay, yeah. The ear things confuse me. The tentacle things. But I don't know how old her race lives. I just don't.
I don't know either. I think normal human age, maybe. I don't know.
Because then it becomes hard. Because then she's at least she's at least 10 years older than Luke or so at the very least.
But she's like, she could, like, I'm not saying that she has to, like, because look, we could have, like, a standalone Ahsoka movie that takes place, like, after the original trilogy, but before the sequel.
Oh, and I'd love that. But I'm just not sure what it would cover, because...
I mean, it could just be her own adventure, and then she randomly runs into Leia, and then she teaches Leia some, like, Jedi trick, and then Leia can use the Force, and no one flips out. I just need Leia and Ahsoka
what I'm saying is, like, if we do a live-action Ahsoka, we really need a lightsaber battle, because Ahsoka is one of the coolest people to watch fight.
Yeah.
She just is.
Yeah. True.
Like, whenever she pulls out her lightsabers, I'm always hyped, because I know that her fights are always amazing.
Yeah. I mean... She like double lightsabers and they're like, oh, she's awesome. And I love how she's just kind of like, wait, she takes like being thrown into a new world so cool.
Oh yeah, she's just ready.
Exactly. But here's the thing though, like this just really, cause remember when Ezra kind of has this like moment of power desperation. Like I wouldn't say power hunger, but kind of desperation cause he's like, I can save Kanan now. And Ahsoka tells him, you have to let go. Like, I couldn't save my master. You can't save yours. Like, I bet that idea went through her head for a split second of, I could go back and stop Anakin from turning.
I think she was actually thinking about it while he was watching. That's what we're supposed to be thinking. It's so interesting because, and then on top of it, these are supposed to be representing the father, the son and daughter again that we were talking about just a little bit ago. Because in this scene, Ezra's wearing a stormtrooper outfit and Ahsoka's wearing her normal garb, and it's supposed to very clearly be Ahsoka's the light side, Ezra's the dark, and they're reconciling that. And it's and I think that's very clearly being.
See, but here's also something interesting. You could also make the argument that. Because the Emperor appeared, like, you know, like where Ezra sees Kanan, like that gateway, right? And he's so close to like intervening that he doesn't. That's the very same gateway where Palpatine appears from, which also represents temptation. Like that probably was Palpatine being like, Ezra, come with me. Like technically, if we went through like the whole good light side, dark side, and gray area, Palpatine would be the dark side, Ezra would be the light side, and Ahsoka would be the gray area. I
guess that is because I guess the way I was originally seeing it was that Ezra was dark, Ahsoka was light, and then Ezra was pulled back to the light, and then that was balanced out by Palpatine showing up.
I see.
Because the balance is so important, because now that they're both light, there needs to be some darkness here, and it was. But I think both of those interpretations are valid. I think not just because it's my opinion that I think my opinion is valid, but I think both these opinions are valid because it's very Star Warsian in that it's just very, very symbolic. A lot of things going on. All these things are very symbolic. You're supposed to be feeling like this story could be told anywhere, not just with time travel. Like this is just classic story tropes being shown to us, but it's showed very well, and that's what Star Wars does when it's at its best.
And I mean, it fits. Like, depending on the point of view, the story changes.
Yeah.
So from a certain point of view, boom. But yeah, so do you think that is there any chance of Ezra going bad in the finale?
Before I thought so, now I don't think so.
Okay. Cause here's the thing also, like once like Ahsoka and him part ways and he promises Ahsoka that they meet, like Ahsoka promises him that they'll meet again, they part ways. The only way that Ezra can close the temple is by touching the sun.
Yes.
Who is the dark one. And he's the one, he faints from the sun.
It's
versus
clear,
like he touches the daughter. You know what I mean? So it's like, is there some repercussion from that?
I think it's clear that, I read that like the holocrons, where like you have to be in tune with that side of the Force to do it. You have to be in tune with the dark side. And I think it was more that was Ezra has touched the dark side before and he could use it, but I don't think that means he's going to be tempted by the dark side.
Okay.
He just knew how to harness it to close the temple. Like I don't think Kanan would have been able to close the temple, for example.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Do you think Ahsoka would have been able to close the temple?
I don't think we've seen enough of her to know for sure, because I don't know how much of the dark side because I forget how much of the dark side she gets, because she gets angry in the Clone Wars, but she never really feels like she's dark, ever.
Yeah, I mean, like, the reason she leaves the Jedi is because she, like, it's more of, she loses faith in them rather than the light side of the Force.
She leaves them on the moral high ground somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is crazy.
So, which, again, it shows how complicated things are. But yeah, so basically something that I also want to point out is that when Ezra sees Kanan die again, he hears Hera's scream.
Like, I knew this was going to happen when he said he was going to go try to save Kanan, but it still was it was horrible to watch again from a different angle.
And every time, like, for me, it isn't even him. It's just hearing Hera's voice, hearing that pain, and just being, like, he's gonna carry that with him. Like, if before maybe in the heat of the moment, he kind of, like, maybe, you know, like, in the adrenaline rush of everything that happens in the shock, it doesn't, like, it doesn't really sink in. Now he really can't forget that voice of Hera.
Because in the original scene, it's, the explosion really takes up a lot of the audio in that first time.
Yeah.
But this time, everything except for the voices is turned down, so you can really hear the voices. So even though I knew Hera had screamed, you didn't really get to hear the acting that she had done.
Yeah,
the voice actor did
totally.
Until this time, because they really just separated the audio tracks for this, and it really hits home.
Totally. It was heartbreaking again, and that, like, okay, here's my biggest worry for the finale. Will Ahsoka survive?
I think at this point Ahsoka has to survive.
Like, they can't bring her back just to kill her off.
Ahsoka's surviving. And
she has to.
I'm sorry. I paused because I'm trying to think of, like, why you would bring her back just to kill her again. Because I would understand if they brought her back to the temple and then she walked back out through the door she came through, back to fighting Vader again. Because that feels like a very Jedi thing to do. That feels like a very Star Wars thing to do. Be like, I'm here to help you, Ezra, to push you on your way, but then I need to go back to where you took me out of. I can't I can't break this chain that you've broken. But and I'd be okay with that. That's the only way I could see Ahsoka dying. But we're past that. I don't see Ahsoka dying at this point.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So we get so the Emperor tries to grab the two. They split up. They promise to meet again. The crew seals the portal. And then we finally get this goodbye to Kanan because they leave. And then the next shot we see is the temple being gone. And it's just this vastness of desert, I guess. So, one, is there an emptiness of force energy in Lothal now? Or is it just, that Kanan's connection to them, that presence that they kind of felt even after he was gone is just disappeared?
I think it's more the Kanan thing. I think Lothal's, it could be both. It could be both. It
Right.
could be that the temple itself can move through space and time as well, and that it's moved from Lothal to somewhere else.
Right.
That was my understanding more than it got destroyed, I guess, that it just got moved somewhere else because it can do that.
I see.
But I think they might have been relating the feeling of the temple to Kanan in some ways, because that was their goal after Kanan died. They related things to this temple, the force energy they felt from this temple. Now that the temple's gone, they feel like they've lost Kanan as well, because they lost kind of the last thing he wanted them to do.
Totally. Yeah, true. I mean, do you think that do you think this is like, all right, this is the closure of Kanan's influence in how the story's going to play out?
I think I think it's the closure. I think this is the closest thing we're going to get to closure. They might mention him. I'm sure they'll mention him at some other point in the finale, but I think this is definitely the most closure we're going to get. We're not going to get something else here. Sabine and Zeb were not close enough to Kanan to get a scene like this, so I think we're done.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. But yeah, so that really does it. So before we finish off this podcast, I wanted to ask you, what do you, give me a theory. What do you think is going to happen?
You want me to be honest with you? I have no clue.
That's a theory too. Not a theory, but that's also, I guess, not knowing.
I just have no clue. Because I don't know what's going to, because we have to resolve Thrawn. We have to resolve where Ezra ends up on the spectrum. We have to resolve Ahsoka. We have to resolve the Rebels and how we lead into the New Hope. I don't know how we're going to do all these things, and I don't know what we're not going to cover, because I feel like we're going to not cover some of these. We might not cover Ahsoka. We might not cover Thrawn, because they could always just make a new show and that talks about Thrawn later. We could throw Thrawn in as another villain in another Star Wars show at some point.
Yeah.
And it's not sure what things they want to hold on to for future things. So I'm not sure what we're going to get into. I'm not sure what things are going to end. I think the one thing I know for sure we're going to touch on is Ezra's place in the spectrum of the Force. But again, I'm not sure what his final thing is going to be. I don't know if he's going to die or not.
Do you think, and this is, feel free to completely reject this, do you think that we'll get an epilogue at the end of this where we time jump into the future?
I think we have.
And either that's during the original trilogy or whatever, and we get a glimpse of where each character ends up.
I think we're not going to get a glimpse of the characters. I think we're going to, this is the type of show I can see ending with one character sitting alone in a room, hearing on the radio something happening from the original trilogy. Okay. I'm sure I'm not saying that's going to be what happens. I'm just going to say we'll see one of the characters viewing something from the original trilogy, and that's all we're going to get. I don't think we're going to get a full epilogue. I think we're going to jump forward just to say yeah, this was at this time in the timeline, we know, but I don't think it's going to be more than just a nod. Okay,
all right. Do you think that in the finale we'll see any of the characters from the original trilogy? Either it being Mon Mothma or Princess Leia, or maybe seeing Senator Organa one last time. What do you think?
I think Senator Organa is the most likely. I do, because I feel like we need to see them one more time. I don't know. It just feels like the most easiest one to fit in. We have a mission to do. Because we don't even know what... I watched the trailer for the series finale, but it tells you almost nothing. It just has a bunch of action shots.
Yeah, basically. I mean, that's why I'm saying, I'm thinking, is there gonna be, some big, are we gonna see Luke? but an actual, like, line from Luke.
I don't know. I just don't. Like, because here's the problem. Here's the problem I have. I don't think they're going to kill somebody else. I just don't think that they can, because they barely, they couldn't even say the word dead. They just couldn't.
Yeah.
Which is insane considering they said the word perish. Like, somehow perish is less final than dead. I don't get it. But, like, I don't think they can kill Ezra. They just can't, from a writing standpoint, like, in terms of...
But, like, well, what's gonna happen then? Because he's a Jedi,
I know. And so...
Like, how can he, like, sit back while Luke is doing this all on his own?
Honestly, I thought they were gonna throw Ezra and Ahsoka somewhere in the past or future, because it just fixes everything.
See, but it can't be, like, so close to, like, Ahsoka. It has to be, like, super far back in the past, like, Knights of the Old Republic.
Or, like I said, it has to be super far back or ahead of the original trilogy, which they didn't do. And they need to do it with Ezra too, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Why did Ezra not help Luke? It just doesn't make sense. Because at this point, Ezra is stronger than Luke. Ezra could have taught some things to Luke and helped him find Yoda. Like, there are just parts of this that don't make sense if Ezra's alive.
But then the same question, like, then what happens to Ahsoka?
I don't...
Like, how can she be present and then not... even try to communicate with Luke or Leia. I need her and Leia to have a scene together.
Here's the possible ending, the way they fix it. It's possible Ezra and Ahsoka go back into the temple, because like I was talking about how Ahsoka wanted to go back to the past and go back to fighting Vader, like that could be a thing. Maybe they realize to balance things, they need to go back to the temple. They need to send themselves back somewhere because they've already messed with the timeline too much.
Okay, so you think that there's, like, repercussions to messing with the timeline?
Yes, I think there could be repercussions. I think that fits with a lot of the things that the show does. I think, I'm sorry, there could be some things there could be consequences we don't know about yet. And that could be why we don't see them. I'm not sure if that's what the show will do, but it feels like it fits more than anything else, because I don't know what else explains it.
Yeah.
Other than Thrawn just straight up killing them, which I don't think the show is going to do.
Okay, do you think the Thrawn's gonna die?
I don't know. I don't know. Because like I said, Thrawn is such a good villain that I feel like he could fill out other shows too.
But at the same time, I feel like he has to die.
He does.
Because then there's certain moments in the original trilogy, certain mistakes that the Empire makes by, like, by the second Death Star. If Thrawn were alive, he would not have let them create that weakness in the middle, there's a possibility that Thrawn lives on through the first movie and maybe even the second one, but not through the third. The third one, yeah.
It's possible we could have, because let's be honest, there's going to be another Star Wars show. Like every time
totally. There's another one in the works probably. We just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. And I'm sure the reason is because the name spoils what part of the timeline it's in.
Yeah.
And I would not be surprised at all if Thrawn lives and we get a show that kind of runs concurrent to the first and second movies in some ways. Because it's made clear, especially in the new trilogy, that we're not seeing the whole rebellion. We're just seeing bits and pieces of it. And it'd be interesting to see that Luke is not the only person fighting. It'd be interesting to see that Luke and Han and Leia are not the only people. They're not the only front.
Gotcha.
And
I mean,
it works a little. It's not as easy to do with the original trilogy material than it is with the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, true. I mean, I just wish, like, I don't know. I kind of just want to do something maybe post original trilogy.
Yes.
And then between trilogy and sequel trilogy, I just want more Leia.
I think that post original trilogy is the most likely. I'm just saying that Thrawn is such a good villain, and he was kind of underused for what we saw so far.
Yeah, totally.
Like whenever he was used well, he was amazing. He was a Lotor. He was an Azula. He always felt like he knew what he was doing. He felt like he matched the name recognition he deserved.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I don't know. It doesn't feel like this finale's about him. That's also the other problem. I don't feel like, because he's in Coruscant right now.
Well, I mean, but he's gonna probably come back. I'm just saying, like, it's 3 episodes all coming together. So it's a lot. It's like an hour and a half. It's a movie, essentially.
I know, and I just have no idea what it's gonna be about. I just have no clue.
But that's the best way to go into something, right?
But I mean, like, it's good. It's good not knowing, but I wish there was hints. Because, I mean, like, when you're watching Avatar, you know that at least you know what the final goal is. You know what the goal of the characters is. I don't feel like the characters have any more motivations left. They've done the things they need to do. And now at this point, it feels like I'm worried this might just feel like a tacked on battle after the emotional climax of this show.
Okay.
Because in Avatar, we knew they needed to do that. We knew they needed to fight the Fire Lord all along. Korra, through the whole season, we knew she had to take down Kuvira. And here, it's like, they're done. They saved Lothal.
Maybe it's take down Thrawn. Take down, like, maybe it's destroy the factory. Now that the fuel's gone, now it's like, now we have to actually destroy it.
Yeah, I guess. That's the only thing I could think of, because that's an okay guess. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry I'm stuttering here. I just have no clue. I just don't know.
It's okay. It's okay not to know. I'm being really hard on you because I'm just like, well, what do you think of this? So
no, I know, and I'm just racking my brain, and I think it's been shown on like the Rick and Morty panels that I cannot think on my feet very well. I don't know.
You're good.
Thrawn, I guess it just stems from the fact that I want to see more Thrawn.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think but it also could extend into. But like I said, I don't know how he fits into this finale. He could just be. He's never really been one-on-one with any of our villains. I don't know. He's never set himself up into position to be killed at any point. And I don't know how we could set him up to die, because he's always the guy in the tower away from the fighting, because he knows that he is more, even though he clearly is good at hand-to-hand combat, that's been shown with him training and stuff.
He knows his mind is more valuable.
He knows that he's more valuable as a tactician, no matter how strong he is in a fight. And I think and that's what makes him interesting, that he knows that. It's like how Azula he's just as good as Azula at fighting, but it's if Azula realized, hey, why am I doing this? This is stupid. I shouldn't be on the front lines. And I like that about him, but I'm just not sure how we get him on the front lines to die. I'm just not sure. Gotcha.
All right, then. Well, on next Monday, we're going to find out. We'll find out, and we'll have all our questions answered. But yeah, everybody, you can find out all the info on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. Join us on Discord to text chat about animation at overlyanimated.com/Discord. Support us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Juliana, aka Juliana. Sorry,
Julie
I'm Latin,
Jana.
so
I think it's Jana. It's supposed to be Jana from Star.
Gotcha. Okay, because I'm Latin. I see J and I think.
No, I get it. I'm helping you out. I think it's supposed to be Julie Jana. It's supposed to be reference to
Julie
Star.
Jana.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, Julie Jana. And thanks as always to our Patreon executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Andy, and Hugh. And also, if you guys are interested in Rebels coverage, we for a while on Overly Animated did cover it. So if you want to listen to some past Rebels coverage, check that out too. So thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.